All right, today we're diving into a really dark fable. This isn't your typical story of good versus evil. It's about a deal with the devil that doesn't just consume one man, it takes down an entire city. And what's really fascinating is where it all begins, not up in the heavens, but down in the muck and mire of the marketplace. So the story just drops us right into the middle of this bustling city Prosperitas with this bombshell of a declaration. You've got a crowd that's gathered for a bit of entertainment, a tightrope walker, but instead they get a sermon on something way, way darker. So let's get into the gospel of the underman. You've got this guy, Vesperus, they call him the inverted Nazarene, and he's standing on this big black marble pedestal. Now, he's not some hermit who just came out of the desert seeking enlightenment. Nope. He's come down from the ivory tower of contemplation right into the chaotic heart of the marketplace. And he's here to preach a sermon that's going to flip everything you think you know about morality upside down. And this is where it gets really wild. Look at how Vesperus just systematically dismantles traditional values. He takes things we think of as good and just flips them. Instead of woe to the rich, he says woe to those who are content. Why? Because being content means you stop striving, you stop wanting more. And that idea of a narrow path to salvation, he just laughs at it. He says, no, I've built a superhighway, but guess what? The tolls are sky high, and only the most ruthless can afford to drive on it. I mean, this isn't just a different point of view. It's a full-on declaration of war against the old ways. And then comes this incredibly brutal moment that just crystallizes his whole philosophy. A tightrope walker who, kind of represents the delicate balance of morality itself. He falls. The crowd panics. But Vesperus, he doesn't even flinch. He just looks down at this broken man and scoffs. A liability, a resource spent. Think about that. To him, the man's life is just an entry on a ledger. No capital means no soul. It's that simple and that horrifying. Okay, so now we're getting into the pact itself. You just know that a sermon like that, so bold, so absolutely dripping with greed, is going to get some attention. And not from the local authorities, no. This kind of talk attracts something older, something powerful, something that can smell boundless ambition from a mile away. And the entity that shows up is Mammon, the spirit of more. Now, you gotta understand, this isn't your classic fire and brimstone demon with horns and a pitchfork. Mammon is much more subtle and honestly, way scarier. He's described as a silken merchant's whisper, like a heat haze you can barely see. He doesn't shout commands. He just suggests. He's that little voice in your head that says, just a little more. You're so close. Just one more acquisition and then you'll finally be happy. You'll be secure. But of course, you never are. So Mammon materializes, looking all magnificent in these robes of spun sunlight, and he lays the contract on the table. And the terms? Well, they're crystal clear and absolutely terrifying. Here's the deal. Vespers gets 24 years. For those 24 years, he gets the Midas touch, the power to turn stone into silver, limitless wealth. But the price? Oh, the price is poetic. He has to trade the eternal for the tangible. And in the end, he himself will become the ultimate tangible asset, a coin that is never spent. And here's the kicker, the really tragic part. As Vesperus signs this demonic contract in his own blood, what does the crowd do? They erupt in cheers. They think they found their savior, their king. They're so blinded by the promise of easy riches that they are literally celebrating their own doom. They're welcoming the man who will become their executioner. So the pact is signed and the poison starts to work immediately. This spirit of more begins to twist Vesperus into something else. He's reborn with a new name, Barthaldus. And whatever humanity he had left, well, it just starts to evaporate. It's a complete personal decay. Barthaldus literally becomes a walking, talking balance sheet. Every person, every experience, every memory gets stripped of its soul and slapped with a price tag. His own children, they're investments. His friends, liabilities. The story says his heart became a dry well. He forgets what bread tastes like, he only knows its price. He is just completely and utterly consumed by this gnawing need to acquire. All right, now we're going to see how this corruption spreads. Because a rot this deep, it never stays contained in just one person, right? The greed of Barthaldus, who is now the master of markets, starts to seep out like a slow-acting poison, infecting the entire city of Prosperitas. And this is such a powerful illustration of how that happens. The whole of society starts to mirror his hollowed-out soul. You see it everywhere. The king? He stops seeing citizens and just sees taxable heads. The priests? They don't measure righteousness by faith but by the weight of his tithe. The law itself twists into a spider's web, designed only to catch the small and let the big, powerful predators through. Even on the most basic level, neighbors who used to share a fire now just build walls of stone between them. And this quote really paints the picture of what the city becomes. It's a land of brutal contrasts. You've got these grand, beautiful mansions rising up, totally insulated from the cries of the hungry people right outside their gates. The whole idea of community is just gone. It's been replaced by deep suspicion and gnawing fear. So Mammon collects his debt. Because here's the thing about a 24-year contract. It ends. That clock has been ticking down the whole time, and no matter how rich or powerful you become, you can't stop it. The time is up. The reckoning is here. And you can see that relentless march to doom right here. After all those years of corruption spreading, we hit year 24. A great trembling seizes Bartholdus. Suddenly, the reality of his deal crashes down on him. For all his power, for all his influence, he's trapped by the ink on that parchment. So what does he do? He runs to his vault, surrounds himself with gold, thinking it can save him. But he couldn't be more wrong. Imagine him there, cowering in his vault, buried in his own treasure. And then he hears Mammon's voice, delivering this final, chilling line. "You have gathered much, Bartholdus. Now you shall be gathered." It's in that moment he finally understands. The treasure he piled up to protect himself is just part of the trap. He wasn't just collecting things. He was making himself into something to be collected. And in a horrifying final twist, he literally becomes the thing he worshipped. All the gold in his vault melts and flows over him, encasing him. He becomes a solid, lifeless statue of immense value. He's no longer a man. He's just an object, stripped of his life, his soul, with his face frozen forever in this expression of pure, eternal agony. And that brings us to the final monument to greed. Because when the man falls, the city he poisoned has to fall with him. It's inevitable. The two are completely intertwined. That very same night, the city just implodes. The resentment of the hungry and the poor, simmering for years, finally ignites. A fire rips through Prosperitus, and because the city's soul was already gone, there's nothing left to save. It's all reduced to ash. And that golden statue of Bartholdus, it's buried, lost in the rubble forever. And so the whole story leaves us with this question, right? A question that's just as powerful today as it was centuries ago. It's a chilling warning about that spirit of more that Mammon represents. It forces you to ask, what's the real cost of relentless ambition? Because as we've just seen, you might gain the whole world, but you risk losing everything that actually matters, your community, and even your own soul.